It was a Tuesday afternoon. Just another ordinary day in the life I had come to know. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rustling of leaves from the trees outside. My husband, Brian's, was at work, and I had the house to myself for a few hours' time to relax, maybe catch up on some reading or indulge in a bit of self-care. Little did I know that those few hours of peace were about to shatter my reality forever. For months, there had been something off. Small, almost imperceptible changes in Brian's behavior, a lingering sense of distance that I couldn't explain. He was always distracted, glued to his phone, and the long hours at work were becoming more frequent. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe even a midlife crisis. After all, we'd been married for over a decade, and I knew that relationships sometimes went through rough patches. But as time went on, my instincts began to scream that something was terribly wrong. It started with the texts. I noticed Brian being more secretive with his phone, always face down, when he set it on the table, turning it off when I entered the room. I told myself I was just being paranoid. It wasn't like we had a perfect marriage, but we had always trusted each other. He had never given me a reason to doubt him. Or so I thought. One day, when he was in the shower, I decided to check his phone. I had never done this before, but something deep within me told me I had to. As I scrolled through his messages, my heart began to race. Most of them were from a number I didn't recognize, filled with messages that sent a chill down my spine. Can't wait to see you tonight. I am counting the minutes. And last time was amazing. My hands were shaking as I read each message, the reality of what I was seeing sinking in. It was like the ground had fallen out from under me. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but it felt like hours. I had to sit down, my mind racing, my body trembling with shock. Could it really be true? Was Brian, the man I had built my life with, the father of my children, really cheating on me? The man who promised to love me through thick and thin was sending those intimate messages to someone else. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable. The more I read, the clearer it became. Brian was having an affair. The thought seemed surreal, but as I pieced together the conversations, the small details, everything pointed to the same horrifying conclusion. He had been lying to me for months, hiding his affair behind the veil of his busy work schedule and the late-night meetings that I had always accepted without question. He had been cheating on me, and I had been too blind to see it. The hurt was almost unbearable, but beneath it, there was a surge of anger, a fiery, almost primal anger that consumed me. How could he do this to me? How could he betray the trust we had built over so many years? The man I had married, the father of our children, was no longer the person I thought he was. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier, for giving him the benefit of the doubt when my gut was telling me something wasn't right. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen, my mind spinning. I needed to think, to process everything that had just been thrown at me. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had been the one who had always supported him, the one who had been there when things got tough, the one who had stood by him through thick and thin. And now, this was how he repaid me. With lies, deceit, and betrayal. I tried to shake the thought, to calm myself, but the more I tried, the more the anger built up inside of me. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just let him get away with it. He needed to pay for what he had done. But how? What could I do to make him feel the weight of his betrayal? Then, it hit me. Revenge. Not the petty kind of revenge, where you yell or scream at someone. No. I needed to do something that would really hit him where it hurt. Something he wouldn't forget. Something that would make him feel the same humiliation and betrayal I was feeling. That's when the idea came to me. It was simple, childish, maybe even a little petty. But in that moment, it felt perfect. I would make him pay in a way that he wouldn't expect. Something that would show him just how deeply his actions had affected me. I would turn the tables, and I would do it with a twist of irony. I smiled to myself as the plan took shape in my mind. He had always been so careful, so calculating, thinking that he could keep his secret affair hidden from me. But he had underestimated one thing: me. I wasn't the naive woman he thought I was. And now, he was going to find that out the hard way. I spent the next few hours preparing for the confrontation. I gathered my things, made sure everything was in place, and waited for the moment when he would come home. I was calm on the outside, but inside, my heart was racing. This was the moment that would change everything. He would never see it coming. As the clock ticked on, I could feel my anticipation building. I knew that when he walked through that door, everything would change. The man I had once loved, the man I had trusted with my heart, would never be the same again. And neither would I. I had caught him. And now, I was ready to make him pay. I don't know what it is about certain moments in life, but some stick with you like nothing else. It's as if they re-etched into your memory, replaying on a loop that you can quite escape from. That day, when I discovered the truth about Brian, was one of those moments. It wasn't just about finding out he was cheating. It was about everything that followed. The moment I realized what he had done to me, I felt something click deep within me. The words he had spoken, the lies he had told, everything I had ever known about our marriage came crashing down, leaving me reeling in disbelief. And then there was the moment when I realized what I had to do next. It wasn't about confronting him directly, not yet. It was about digging deeper. I needed to know everything. I had to uncover every last secret he had been hiding, every piece of the puzzle he had tried so hard to keep hidden from me. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't like I had any other choice. I had already seen the messages, the evidence that confirmed what I had been avoiding for so long. But I still had so many unanswered questions. Who was she? How long had it been going on? How many times had he lied to my face while secretly betraying me? The answers to these questions gnawed at me, haunting my every thought. Like a broken record that refused to stop playing, I couldn't just sit back and let it go. Not after everything. Not after everything he had taken from me. The following days were filled with a mixture of anger, pain, and confusion. I found myself going through his things, searching for any clue, any hidden piece of information that could provide answers. I found his jacket in the closet, and I almost felt silly for thinking I might find anything. But I opened the pockets anyway, my fingers trembling as I reached inside. There, buried deep within the lining of his coat, was a small slip of paper. I pulled it out cautiously, as if afraid it might crumble in my hands. And there it was, another clue, another piece of the puzzle. It wasn't much, just an address, but it was enough to make my heart race with a mix of anger and fear. He had been meeting her at this location, a place I had never heard of before. I had to know more. I wasn't about to let him get away with this. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just confront him blindly. I needed to gather all the pieces before I made my next move. I had to find out everything: who she was, how long they had been seeing each other, and what exactly had been going on behind my back. It wasn't about punishing him just yet. It was about making sure I had all the facts before I made any decisions. The next day, I drove to the address. I don't know why I didn't just confront him at that point. Maybe it was because I wasn't ready to face him. Or maybe I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. Either way, I found myself standing outside a small, unremarkable building, staring at the door, unsure of what I might find on the other side. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, debating with myself whether or not to go in. The idea of walking through that door filled me with dread. But at the same time, I knew I had to. I couldn't just walk away from this. Not now. I must have stood there for at least an hour before I finally gathered the courage to knock. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a skeptical look on her face. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for the wave of emotions that hit me the moment I saw her. She was just an ordinary woman, no different from anyone else. Yet standing in front of her, I felt as though I was staring into the very heart of my pain. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could feel the tension in the air. Then she spoke, and her words cut through the silence like a knife. "I don't think you should be here," she said. For a brief moment, I considered walking away. Maybe it would have been easier. But I couldn't. I had to know everything. I know about you and Brian, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. I know what's been going on. Her expression faltered. Just for a second. Before she recovered her composure. She stepped back and motioned for me to come inside. This isn't what you think it is, she said. But I could hear the lie in her voice. I didn't need her to explain herself. I had all the information I needed. The conversation that followed was a blur. I don't even remember most of it. Just bits and pieces. She told me that she had met Brian at a work event, and that it had started innocently enough. But soon, they had become more than just acquaintances. They had shared moments that, apparently, had been too much to resist. She told me she wasn't proud of what had happened, but she wasn't sorry either. I felt my anger swell as I listened to her words. How could she be so indifferent to the damage she had caused? But what struck me most was the realization that this wasn't just about Brian. It wasn't just about the betrayal he had inflicted on me. It was about everything: the lies, the manipulation, the careful construction of a life that had been built on deceit. I had trusted him, loved him, and he had thrown all of that away without a second thought. It wasn't just his affair that hurt, it was everything that had led up to it. Every moment of happiness I thought we had shared now felt tainted, as if it had all been a lie. The woman apologized, but her apology meant nothing to me. She was just another piece of the puzzle, another person who had helped shatter my world. And as I stood there, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness wash over me. All the questions I had, all the things I thought I needed to know, seemed so insignificant now. The truth was simple: Brian had betrayed me, and nothing could ever change that. I left the building feeling hollow, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I didn't know what to do next. Should I go back to Brian and confront him? Should I leave him and never look back? The uncertainty was overwhelming. But there was one thing I knew for sure. Everything had changed. There was no going back to the life I had once known. And as much as I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him feel the same pain I was feeling, I knew I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment. The moment when I could finally take control of the situation. Until then, I would gather my strength and prepare for what was to come. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, a constant tide of anger, sadness, and, strangely enough, a deep sense of determination. The discovery of Brian's betrayal had left a mark on me, one that I couldn't ignore or simply walk away from. But I also realized that I couldn't just confront him head on, not yet. I needed to let the situation settle, gather my thoughts, and figure out exactly what my next move would be. My gut was telling me that I needed to act carefully. I couldn't let my emotions drive the decisions I made in the heat of the moment. I had to plan. As I sat in our living room that night, I found myself pacing, lost in thought. Every scenario played out in my mind like a twisted movie, each version ending in confrontation, shouting, accusations, and the overwhelming sense that nothing would be the same afterward. The betrayal was hard enough to stomach, but what hurt even more was the thought of losing everything we had built together. The years of marriage, the shared memories, the future I had envisioned. How could I possibly move forward after this? But the answer was simple. I couldn't just move on. I couldn't just let him walk away without facing the consequences. What he had done to me, to our marriage, was beyond words. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking control of the situation, taking back my dignity, and showing him that I wasn't someone to be taken for granted. He needed to feel the consequences of his actions in the way that only he could understand. I didn't want to be the victim, the one who sat in silence, nursing my wounds and accepting what had happened. No, I wanted to reclaim my power, my agency, and make sure that Brian understood that his actions had consequences. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, it was about leveling the playing field, making sure that he knew I was no longer the naive woman who would let him walk all over me. That's when the idea hit me. It wasn't a grand, elaborate plan, but rather a simple one, something that would turn the tables in a way that he would never see coming. It was petty, childish even, but it was also the perfect way to make him feel the weight of his betrayal. I would give him a taste of his own medicine, not by confronting him directly, not by yelling or fighting. No, I would be far more calculated. I would use the one thing that he had trusted most, his own sense of control, against him. The plan was simple but effective. I would swap the lube he kept in his nightstand for something else, something far less pleasant. I knew it would be humiliating, but I also knew it would be a shock to his system. I would make him feel what it was like to be trapped, to be caught in a situation that he couldn't control, something that would make him realize just how far his actions had gone in making a mockery of everything I thought we had. I went to the store the next day and found exactly what I needed. It wasn't hard to find just a simple bottle of industrial-strength glue, the kind that was strong enough to bond anything, no matter how sticky the situation. I wasn't sure exactly what would happen when he used it, but the thought of his reaction was enough to make me feel a strange sense of satisfaction. He would never see it coming. That night, I waited for Brian to come home, my heart racing with anticipation. I knew he wouldn't expect anything unusual. After all, it was just another night in our marriage, another evening where he'd come home late from work, had dinner, and probably settled into his usual routine. But tonight, everything would change. Tonight, I would take back control, and he would learn exactly what it meant to betray me. When Brian finally arrived home, I could hear the sound of his keys jingling in the hallway as he entered. I sat there in the living room, my fingers nervously tapping on the coffee table, trying to keep my emotions in check. He called out to me from the doorway, his voice casual, almost cheerful, as if nothing had changed. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took a deep breath, gathered my thoughts, and walked toward him. He looked at me with a smile, clearly unaware of the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. "Hey, babe," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "How was your day?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "It was fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "How about yours?" "Oh, you know," he replied with a shrug. "Busy. Same old. Same old." He didn't seem to notice the tension in the air, the way my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. His mind was probably still preoccupied with whatever had been going on with his affair. Little did he know, I was about to turn everything upside down. I excused myself for a moment, and when I returned, I had the bottle of glue in my hand. Brian didn't seem to notice at first, but I could tell that he was beginning to sense something was different. There was something about the way I was acting, the stillness in my movements, that gave him pause. "I am just going to freshen up," I said, turning toward the bathroom. I made sure to let the door close behind me, but not before I heard him mumble something to himself, probably something about how he had another late night ahead of him, or how tired he was. As soon as I was out of sight, I carefully swapped the lube bottle with the glue, placing it where he usually kept it. It was a small, seemingly insignificant change, but in that moment, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just the act itself. It was the symbolism. I was taking back control. I was making sure that he would never take me for granted again. After I finished, I walked back into the living room, pretending as though nothing was wrong. Brian was sitting on the couch, flipping through the channels on the TV. He glanced up at me and gave me a half smile. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, his voice a little softer now. I nodded, maintaining my calm exterior. "Yes, just wanted to make sure everything was in place for tonight." "Oh, yes. What's going on tonight?" he asked, his eyes glinting with curiosity. I forced myself to meet his gaze, allowing the silence to linger for just a moment longer. "Nothing special," I replied, my voice steady. "Just wanted to make sure things were aligned." "You know," he didn't ask any more questions, probably thinking I was just being my usual distant self. But inside, I was preparing for the inevitable. I knew that he would soon realize something was wrong. The tension was palpable now, a feeling I couldn't shake. What followed next was something I'll never forget. That evening, when the plan was set into motion, I had no idea what to expect. I had prepared myself for the worst, an immediate confrontation, anger, maybe even tears. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment that would unfold. I thought I had control over the situation, but in reality, it was unfolding in ways I had never anticipated. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I could hear Brian moving around the house, shifting between the living room and the kitchen. I could feel the weight of the silence hanging between us. It was as if the air itself had thickened, charged with an energy that neither of us could escape. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to face the consequences of his actions in a way that would change everything. I waited, sitting in the living room, my heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweaty. I had prepared for so many scenarios, all of them leading to a dramatic confrontation. Yet, as Brian moved about the house, blissfully unaware of what was about to happen, I realized I was far more in control than I'd ever given myself credit for. He still thought everything was normal. He thought I was the same woman he had left that morning. He had no idea that his world was about to shift. When he finally walked into the room, everything seemed almost too quiet. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something in them: uncertainty. Perhaps a momentary glance of confusion. I quickly composed myself, taking a deep breath and giving him the smile I knew would disarm him, even if only for a second. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice sounding different somehow. It wasn't casual. There was something there, an edge to his tone that made me pause for a second. It was as if he sensed something was amiss, but couldn't quite put his finger on it. I nodded, playing along. "Yes, just tired. It's been a long day. You know." He gave a half smile and sat down beside me on the couch, reaching for the remote control to flip on the TV. For a moment, everything seemed normal again, so normal, in fact, that I almost convinced myself that nothing had changed. Maybe I was just overreacting, letting my emotions get the better of me. Maybe this was just another phase in our marriage. But then I remembered the truth. I remembered the lies. And with that thought, everything inside me hardened again. I waited. I knew it wouldn't take long. Brian had no idea what I had done. No clue that his actions were about to catch up to him in a way he never could have predicted. As I watched him sitting next to me, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away, I felt a sense of satisfaction settle over me. He wasn't in control anymore. Not now. Not in this moment. What happened next happened so fast that it almost didn't feel real. I heard the sound of him shifting, a small noise, one I couldn't quite place. I looked up to see his face contorting into an expression of pure confusion. For a split second, I felt my stomach lurch. He reached down and grabbed the bottle from the side table, and then the quiet sound of him unscrewing the cap echoed in the room. In that moment, time seemed to stretch out. Brian took a deep breath and, without thinking, applied the contents of the bottle. The silence was deafening. I could see his confusion deepen, his face scrunching in disbelief as he realized something was wrong. His hand froze in mid-motion. For a brief moment, I thought he might laugh it off, thinking it was a joke or some kind of mistake. But then his eyes widened, and the color drained from his face. That was when I knew. The reality of what I had done had hit him full force. His reaction was everything I had hoped for. His body stiffened, his fingers unable to move. The realization setting in that something was horribly wrong. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, as he tried to move his hand. But it wouldn't budge. The sticky, thick substance that I had replaced his usual lube with had worked its magic. And in that moment, as his panic set in, I felt a strange rush of vindication. I didn't react immediately. Instead, I watched as Brian's face turned from confusion to fear, from disbelief to panic. He tried to pull his hand away, but it was no use. The glue had done its job. It was powerful, industrial-grade adhesive, and it held fast, as sticky as it was unforgiving. His face flushed as he tried again, this time more urgently, pulling at his hand with all his might. But it was futile. His efforts were in vain. At first, I thought he would shout, maybe even get angry. But instead, there was only silence, the kind of silence that comes with utter disbelief. His eyes flicked to mine, and in them, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Vulnerability. He was no longer the one in control. He wasn't the one making decisions. In that moment, I saw him as I had never seen him before, helpless, confused, desperate. He tried again, harder this time, his face contorting with frustration. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "What the hell did you put in there?" I remained calm. Too calm. Maybe. I had worked hard to create this moment, to make sure that he felt what I had been feeling all this time, trapped, helpless, caught in something that he couldn't escape from. "You'll figure it out soon enough," I said quietly, not offering any more details. "But you can escape it." Not this time. It wasn't just the physical bind that had him stuck, it was the emotional one, too. He was realizing, slowly but surely, what had been happening all along. My actions, the glue, the way he was now trapped in his own situation, were all a reflection of what he had done to me. Every time he had lied to me, every time he had sneaked around, thinking I wouldn't notice, it was now being mirrored back at him. He had no control. He had no escape. I watched as he began to panic more, trying to move, trying to figure out how to get out of the mess he had gotten himself into. But the more he struggled, the more I realized how far gone he truly was. It wasn't just the physical discomfort, though that was part of it. It was the realization that he couldn't fix what he had broken. He couldn't just erase the pain, the lies, the deception. Not now. Not anymore. At one point, he tried to stand up, only to stumble and fall back onto the couch, his body unable to move the way he wanted. The sight of him, this man who had once been so confident, so sure of himself, reduced to this state of helplessness, was surreal. It was as if everything that had been buried beneath the surface, every emotion I had pushed aside, suddenly rushed forward. I had spent so long hiding my pain, hiding my fears, but now it was impossible to ignore. He was seeing the consequences of his actions in real time. The truth was unfolding in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He looked at me with pleading eyes, his voice filled with desperation. "Please," he whispered. "Please, help me." But I didn't help him. I couldn't. This was his moment of reckoning, the one he had avoided for so long. I stood there, watching him, feeling a strange sense of calm. He had no idea what was coming next. And, for the first time in a long time, I was finally in control. The situation had spiraled into something far more complex than I had ever imagined. What began as a simple act of revenge, a petty yet satisfying means of making Brian feel even a fraction of the humiliation he had caused me, had now turned into something much larger, something I could no longer control. The reality of the situation hit me all at once when Brian began to panic in a way that was far more intense than I had anticipated. I had expected him to be embarrassed, to feel trapped in the situation I had carefully set up for him. But what I didn't anticipate was the sheer panic that would overtake him. I could see it in his eyes, the fear, the desperation. He was no longer the man who had lied to me, who had sneaked behind my back with some faceless woman. He was now a frightened man, trapped in a sticky, humiliating situation with no way out. I watched as he struggled to free himself, his movements frantic, his breathing shallow and panicked. It was almost as if he was drowning in his own shame, and I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction as I observed his discomfort. It wasn't just about the glue anymore. It was about something deeper, something that connected the two of us in this moment. He had taken everything from me, and now, for the first time, I was the one who had the upper hand. He was desperate now, thrashing on the couch, his hand still stuck to the surface of the table. I knew he was trying to figure out what to do, how to handle this, but there was no easy way out for him. As he fought to break free, I could see the realization slowly sinking in. He wasn't going to be able to escape this. Not by his own will. And for that brief moment, I could see that he knew exactly what had happened. He had been caught. Not in the act of cheating. Not in the middle of some passionate affair. But in the mess of his own actions. He was now a victim of the web of lies he had so carelessly woven. I stood there, silently watching him, my heart pounding in my chest. Every part of me wanted to jump in and make it better, to somehow undo what had been done. But I knew I couldn't. The moment had passed, and there was no going back now. The only way forward was through. So, I stayed quiet, allowing him to flounder in his own despair. His voice grew louder as he began to scream for help. His attempts to break free from the sticky grip of the glue were fruitless. The more he struggled, the worse it became. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking with panic. "What did you do to me? Please. You have to help me." But I didn't answer him. I couldn't. What could I possibly say that would make this situation any better? There was no fixing this. There was no taking back the lies, the broken trust, or the years of betrayal. The glue wasn't just a physical barrier. It had become a symbol, a physical manifestation of the emotional walls that had been built between us over the years. He had betrayed me, and now I was making him face the consequences. I was making him feel trapped, helpless, just as I had felt when I first discovered his affair. It wasn't just the glue that held him there now. It was the weight of his actions, the guilt of what he had done. As he continued to struggle, his breath becoming more erratic, I could see the panic escalating. His face was a mix of confusion, fear, and anger. He wanted to be free, but he couldn't escape. He was stuck not just physically, but emotionally. And that, more than anything, was what I needed him to understand. The silence between us grew thick, the tension almost unbearable. I could hear his labored breathing, the frantic scratching of his hand against the table, as if he thought that by some miracle he could tear himself free. But there was no miracle here. No way out, except for the reality that he had to face what he had done. He had to understand the magnitude of the hurt he had caused, the betrayal that had left me feeling lost, alone, and betrayed. And then it hit me what I was truly doing here. This wasn't just about revenge, about getting back at him for cheating. It was about making him realize, in the most visceral way possible, the pain he had caused. He wasn't just stuck to that table. He was stuck in a moment of reckoning. And as much as it hurt me to see him like this, I knew it was what he needed. It wasn't about teaching him a lesson. For the sake of it was about making him feel what I had felt for so long. Helpless, powerless, and completely at the mercy of the situation. He stopped struggling for a moment, his body going limp, as if he had finally realized the futility of his efforts. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in them that wasn't anger or arrogance. There was a flicker of regret, maybe even shame. It was a moment of clarity, one that I had hoped for, but didn't fully expect to come. He understood now, in that moment, that what he had done to me was unforgivable. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of his realization. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice shaky and raw. It was a simple sentence, but the weight of it hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. Not yet anyway. He wasn't begging for sympathy. He was simply acknowledging what I had known for so long, that he had crossed a line, one that couldn't be undone with words or apologies. And I realized in that moment that his apology, as weak as it was the first step toward redemption. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I remained silent, watching him. There was no need for more words. His struggle, his desperation, the tears that threatened to spill from his eyes, they were all the answers I needed. I didn't need him to beg me for forgiveness. I didn't need him to promise me that he would change. I needed him to understand that the damage was done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the silence, and I felt my heart skip a beat. This was it. The moment that would force everything to come to a head. He couldn't get out of this on his own. And I wasn't going to help him. I wasn't going to bail him out of his own mess. He had made his bed. And now he had to lie in it. The fire truck pulled up outside. And within moments, the door burst open. 2 firemen walked in. Their expressions a mix of concern and confusion as they assessed the situation. Brian's face was flushed with embarrassment as he tried to explain what had happened. But his words were incoherent. They didn't care about the details. They were there to do a job to get him out of the situation he had created. One of the firemen walked up to him, assessing the situation. "We need to get you free. But we need to be careful. This stuff is pretty strong," he said. His tone was professional, but I could see the glimmer of amusement in his eyes. He knew, just as I did, that this wasn't just any emergency. It was a spectacle. One that would go down in history as the most bizarre reason anyone had ever needed the fire department. As the firemen worked to remove him from the glue's grasp, Brian's face twisted with frustration and embarrassment. But in that moment, I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel a single ounce of compassion. All I felt was a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that for once, the person who had hurt me was the one who was truly suffering. It was justice, even if it was messy and strange. And as the fireman carefully separated him from the table, I couldn't help but smile to myself. He would never forget this moment. This moment when his betrayal finally caught up with him in the most unexpected way. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching. And stay tuned for more exciting content.